Right. Now you need to talk with me because this is a bio lesson. So we need to have a discussion, a good conversation. Otherwise, this is gonna be very difficult for you to study without having an idea about things what we're talking about, right? Okay. So we're gonna talk about living tissues. Basically, we'll be talking here about plant tissues and the animal tissues. Okay. So we have actually in grade 10 came across with the definition of a tissue, right? So if you can remember, tissue is a collection of cells, right? So in our body, in our human body or in animal body, the basic structural and the functional unit is cell, right? So cell can perform a function individually, right? A cell itself can perform a function, right? It can do several things. It can produce energy and it can do different things. If you could remember, even the red blood cells could even transport different components like oxygen, right? So basically, a cell is a component in our body which can bring about a function itself, right? So cell becomes the structural unit in both animals and plants as well, right? The next thing is, now when the cells are getting collected as a cluster, a union, we call it as a tissue. So then tissues have also got different functions. Like, when cardiac cells are getting together to form a tissue, we call that tissue is a cardiac tissue. Cardiac tissue involves in the formation of the heart, right? So we know bones are made up of cells. Bone cells get together to form a bone tissue, right, which makes up the bones, skeletal system in your body. And then when you talk about red blood cells, white blood cells, and all of these cells get together to form the blood tissue, right? And it has a function. So then cardiac tissue has a function of the forming of heart. Bone tissues have a function of forming of the bone, skeletal system. And then this blood tissue as a collection of red blood cells and white blood cells have a function to form blood, which is used for the transportation mainly in our body. So we have different tissues made up of cells. Cells individually has a function. Cells individually have a function on their own. And then when they become a tissue as a cluster, this tissue also have a particular function to perform. Are we clear with that, guys?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So let's write out this definition for the tissue, right, like this. A group of cells, tissue, a group of cells, what are called tissues. You can write this heading, and then quickly you can write a group of cells, with a common origin, a group of cells with a common origin, a group of cells with a common origin, a group of cells with a common origin that has been modified, to perform a particular function, in living body, is called a tissue, a group of cells with a common origin that has been modified to perform a particular function is called a tissue. A group of cells with a common origin that has been modified to perform a particular function in living body is called a tissue, right? Okay, so that is the basic definition for tissues, not the definition for plant tissues or for the animal tissue. For both of them, that is the general definition for a tissue, right? It may be plants or animals, but that is the definition for the tissue, right? Okay, so then we're going to talk about plant tissues. Okay, so up to now, we have not yet spoke about plant tissues. We have spoken about animal tissues in different types. We have spoken about animal cells, right? But we have not gone through plant tissues. This is the first time that we are talking about plant cells and tissues. Okay. So when you talk about the plant tissues, right? Basically, the plant tissues in the plant can be divided mainly into two categories. Okay, as meristematic tissues and the permanent tissues, right? So now this actually you have to highlight these points, right? You have to highlight these points. So when you are like going through the printed tube, you go through this recording again and then highlight these parts, which is much important, right? So plant tissues are divided into two main categories depending on what? By considering their cell division. right? By considering their cell division, plant tissues are divided mainly into two groups, right? Plant tissues are mainly divided into two groups by considering their cell division. So then when something gets divided into, when two tissues get divided into two categories, depending on their cell division, you would obviously understand one type of a tissue may not divide by cell division, and the other type would have the ability to divide their cells, right? So you know the tissue is made up of cells. Cells in this tissue, cells in the cell, by considering the cell division ability in this tissue, we divide them into two categories as meristematic tissues and permanent tissues, right? Okay, so when you talk about meristematic tissues, cell division can take place, right? When you talk about these meristematic tissues, cell division takes place. Okay, so when you talk about permanent tissue, no cell division, right? No cell division. So that is the main difference of the two types of tissues present in plants. Plants contain two types of tissues. How do we categorize them into two? By considering their cell division of the cells. So in meristematic tissues contain cells which have the ability to divide by cell division. Mitosis is the cell division. Okay, so you can write cell division is what? Mitosis. Include that also. Mitosis is cell division, right? So by mitosis, cells in the meristematic tissues can be divided. But when you talk about the permanent tissues, they have no capability of dividing their cells. They have no capability of dividing their cells. No cell division takes place. Are we clear with that part, guys? Are we clear with that part? Right. Okay. So then I just want to remind, what do you mean by growth? I just want you to answer me. What do you mean by growth? We actually have spoken about two types of growth, right? We have spoken about the growth of unicellular organisms, and we have spoken about the growth of multicellular organisms. You need to put this down, right? You need to note them down somewhere in the table, okay? So we basically talk about now the growth of a multicellular organism. Growth of a multicellular organism, right? Growth of a multicellular organism. Now, when you talk about a growth of the multicellular organism, can you remember how the multicellular organism are starting to build up their structure? They start off with a sperm, right? Sperm is an end cell which contains only 23 chromosomes that fuses with an ovum, right? Ovum is another 23, another end cell which contains only 23 chromosomes. Then what will be formed? The zygote. Zygote will be formed. Zygote is a 2N cell, which means it contains 46 chromosomes. So this is the first cell of the new organism. First cell of the new organism. Okay, new organism. This is the first cell of the new organism. Okay, so when you talk about this first cell of the new organism, this is our start. This is our start. So though you are a multicellular organism, now you have started your journey with a single cell called zygote. Then what does this zygote do? It starts dividing, right? Cell division. It starts cell division. What is the cell division type? Right, that is mitosis. What is the cell division type? Mitosis. Through mitosis, the number of, now you have only one cell as a zygote, which contains 46 chromosomes. Now zygote start dividing it, start cell division. Cell division takes place there in mitosis. So when that happens, what happens is zygote, this cell called zygote will be replicated, right? Then the cell number increases. Then it forms different structures called morula, blastocyst, and all these things, and finally ends up in embryo, right? Finally ends up in embryo, fetus. Likewise, an infant is formed by the cell division of mitosis. Now, how did we start our journey? As a single cell, you call that as zygote. But embryo contains many cells. How? The cell division has taken place, mitosis cell division has taken place, and cell division has started in zygote to increase the number of cells. Now the cell number increases. Now the organism has grown. Now, can you remember how you were when you were small, right? So you had very little amount of, not very little, like you had less number of cells in your body than now, right? So you're growing in the sense, you're growing means, right, that you're increasing your number of cells in the body, as a result of mitosis, as a result of cell division. So that's what happened to you. That's what has happened to you now, right? You have grown, you have increased your size, you have increased your height, right? That increase of your height and the size is irreversible, right? So you have grown, you have increased the number of cells, right? So then you can have a definition for the growth of the multicellular organism is the growth of the multicellular organism is the increase of number of cells in the body. So what do you mean by growth of the multicellular organism? Growth of the multicellular organism is increase in the number of cells in the body, right? Growth of the multicellular organism means increase in the number of cells in the body. Okay, that's what simply it is, right? Increase in the number of the cells of the body is called the growth of the multicellular organism, right? So then here we come to understand what is the growth of a unicellular organism, right? Then we can talk about what is the growth of a unicellular organism. Okay, let's see. Growth of a unicellular organism, right? Now what you have to understand is unicellular organism contain only one cell. It can't increase the number of cells, right? It can't increase the number of cells. So then it has only one cell. What can you understand? So you have a unicellular organism with a one cell in this size. So then the size of the organism increases up to this. Now size and the mass of the cell have now increased. Now this should be irreversible. This condition has to be irreversible, which means there are some situations some cells can increase the size and the weight or size and the mass of the cell by filling up some liquids inside, like water, let's say, right? Some cells can fill up some water or else some other liquid into them to increase their structure, increase their shape, increase their size, and to increase their mass. But ultimately, what happens when the water inside of the cell goes out, it goes back into the initial size and the mass. So that is not what we refer as the growth of a unicellular organism. So what do you mean by the growth of a unicellular organism? By its own body increasing the size of the organelles inside the cell. So then the size of the structure of the cell increases. And when the size of the organelles inside the cell increases, the mass of the cell also increases, right? So then this has to be an irreversible process. That means once the cell is really grown, once the cell increases its mass really, once the cell increases its size really, the condition should not be reversed. Condition should not be able to reverse. So then what we refer as the growth of a unicellular organism is the growth of a unicellular organism means the growth of a unicellular organism means is the irreversible growth and the size of a cell, right? The growth of a unicellular organism is the irreversible increase. Sorry, I have not written that. Irreversible increase of the growth and the size of an organ of a cell. Right, hold on. Irreversible increase of the growth and the size of the cell, right? The irreversible increase of the growth and the size of the cell is called the growth of a unicellular organism. So you need to understand these two concepts. Now, if you can remember this part, the growth of a unicellular organism was the question in your question paper, that question paper, grade 10, the one which you did very recently. It was a question, right? So what do you mean by the growth of a unicellular organism? Increasing the you have to indicate it as a dry increase. Sorry. I'm sorry. Definition is wrong. Huh? Sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. Hold on. I will write it again. Hold on. increase of the size and the dry mass of a cell. I'm sorry. The growth of a unicellular organism is the irreversible increase of the dry mass and the size of the cell. Right? This is what the definition is. I'm sorry. Yeah. So a growth of a unicellular organism means the irreversible increase of the dry mass and the size of the cell. Okay. Irreversible increase of the irreversible increase of the dry mass and the size of the cell is called the growth of a unicellular organism. So you should know the meaning of these two. You should know the meaning of these two because, before you talk about this lesson, right? So growth of a unicellular organism means the irreversible increase of the dry mass and the size of the cell. And then when you talk about a multicellular organism is growing means that it is increasing the number of cells in it by doing cell division, right? That's what we need to know, right? So you can, I hope you can copy this down very quickly, right? The growth of a unicellular organism is the irreversible increase of the dry mass and the size of the cell. It has to be a irreversible process. You can't reverse it back, right? Okay, so now we know we have two different types of plant tissues. One is meristematic tissues. They have the capability of dividing the cells, and permanent tissues, they have no ability to divide their cells, right? So then you could understand, okay, if the plant is growing, the cell number has to be increased. So what cell number should be increasing? Obviously the meristematic tissues, right? Because they are the tissues which have the cells that have the ability to divide actively by mitosis, right? So then, so you keep it in your mind, if the growth is taking place in the plant, that growth is responsible by the division of cells in the meristematic tissues. Okay, all right. So then here we go. Let's write the definition for. Did you understand that part, guys? Was it clear to you? Hello, was it clear to you?
Yes, sir.
What about Upekha?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. So then let's talk about the meristematic tissues. Okay, write the definition. This definition you should write. Write the definition. Tissues with cells, tissues with cells, tissues with cells, tissues with cells that divide actively by mitosis to produce new cells are called meristematic tissues, right? Cells, tissues with cells that divide actively by mitosis, to produce new cells are called meristematic tissues. So if you have any tissue in the plant which has the capability of doing cell division, that tissue has to be obviously a meristematic tissue, right? And these tissues are responsible for the growth of the plant, different parts of the plant. We'll talk about that later, right? Okay. Tissues with cells that divide actively by mitosis to produce new cells are called meristematic tissues. So now here it says something called actively, that divide actively. Cell division takes place actively, which means needs energy, right? You could write requires energy, right? Okay, so that is a very important point. So these tissues have cells which have the capability of doing the cell division, actively by mitosis. That means this process needs energy. This process needs energy, right? This needs energy. So then these cells should given a good supply of energy. They should be supplied good amount of energy because they need much energy to carry out their function to do the cell division. Okay, so keep that in your mind because we have some specification of these cells to produce more energy. Okay, right. So that's it. Then we're going to talk about few characteristics of these cells. Meristematic tissues contain small-sized living cells. Small-sized living cells. Why do we like talk uh, talk about these cells as living cells? Because now when you talk about these plant cells, so far when we were talking about the tissues, we have spoken all the tissues which contain living cells. But when you talk about these plants and plant tissues, we find some tissues which are made from dead cells. Okay, so until we find that find those tissues which are made up of dead cells, we have to talk every time. When you talk about every time about a tissue, we should mention the cells in that particular tissue contain living cells or dead cells, right? So meristematic tissue contains living live cells, and those cells are very small size and they are living. You have to highlight that part. The tissue, the cells in the meristematic tissues are living, so it's a living tissue, and then the cells are very small. Next one, no intercellular spaces or no intercellular spaces or intercellular spaces are not prominent. Right? What do you mean by the intercellular spaces? Now you should have heard when these cells are arranged, right? When you talk about this plant cell, you should know about the structure of a plant cell. If you can remember, plant cell has this hexagonal shape, isn't it? It has this shape, right? It has this shape. So we call the outermost layer as the cell wall, and then this is cell wall, right? This is cell wall, and then the inner layer is called as the cell membrane. This is called cell membrane, right? Cell membrane. And then if you can remember, it has a very giant vacuole at the very middle, a large vacuole. This is called the vacuole, right? Vacuole. And at the very corner, because of you have a very central large vacuole, the nucleus is cornered. So this nucleus is called a peripheral nucleus, right? Peripheral nucleus, right? This is called a peripheral nucleus, a cornered nucleus. So this is the structure of a plant cell, right? So you have this hexagonal shape here, cell wall, outermost membrane and outermost wall as the cell wall, and then inner to that you have the cell membrane and a giant vacuole in the middle, and then the cornered or the peripheral vacuole nucleus, right? So this is the structure. So when you talk about this structure, right, you can copy it down. When you talk about the structure, how they are arranged, these plant cells also have some spaces among the arrangement, right? So when they are like arranged like this, they have some spaces left in between of them, right? Okay, you didn't see that, no? Right? Okay, just copy down this very quickly if you are copying it. All right. Anyway, go through this discussion after you take the print out, because you need to note down different things here, highlight the parts. That's very important, huh? Right? Okay, so take a printout very as soon as possible, right? Okay, so then I'll talk about this part. When you have the cells arranged in a tissue, right? Any cells arranged in a tissue, you have some spaces among the cells, right? We call them as intercellular spaces. Like I won't be drawing hexagonal shapes. I'll just be drawing these circles like things. So you have spaces among these cells. We call them as intercellular spaces. But when you talk about these meristematic tissues are lack of these intercellular spaces, but they are very tightly packed, very strongly packed, so they have no intercellular spaces at all, or else there would be very minimum. That the intercellular spaces cannot be considered as prominent spaces. That means negligible spaces are there in between cells. So basically, you can consider the meristematic tissue has cells which have no intercellular spaces among them, right? That's a very important fact that you need to understand and highlight, right? So they have no intercellular spaces among the cells, right? Next one, a distinct nucleus is available in each cell. Now, whenever you observe the cell, you could see a perfect clear nucleus. A distinct clear nucleus could be observed. That means they have a nucleus. Because we'll be talking about plant cells which have no cells also, right? Basically, when you know about cells, Other than red blood cells, all the animal cells we spoke had a nucleus. You could, I think you can remember the red blood cells did not have a nucleus, that is to occupy more space to transport oxygen. But when you talk about this plant cell, in plant cells also there are some cells, plant cells, which do not contain nucleus. But meristematic tissues, cells in meristematic tissues are not like that. They have nucleus. Okay, a distinct nucleus, a clear nucleus is available, right? Then they have no large central vacuoles, right? A characteristic of a plant cell is to have a very large vacuole, but in meristematic tissues, they have no cells contain large vacuoles. Okay, a very small vacuole can be present. Then the next thing is no chloroplast. No chloroplast in the sense no chlorophyll. No chlorophyll, right? No chloroplast in the sense no chlorophyll. That means no photosynthesis. That means no photosynthesis, right? No photosynthesis. Guys, keep it in your mind. These cells have no duty given as to carry out photosynthesis. Now, whenever you are talking about plant cells, you think all the cells in the plants are capable of carrying out photosynthesis. It is a duty of them, and every cell in the plant has to carry out photosynthesis. No, it's not like that. These meristematic tissues are taken off their duty of photosynthesis. They have not given a chloroplast. That means they do not produce chlorophyll. That means they do not carry out photosynthesis. That is a very important point that you need to highlight and write this down. Okay, so they do not do photosynthesis. So then what you can understand from them, now they had a function what to do cell division. That means to increase their number of cells that results in the growth of the plant. So now when just imagine when a cell is given with 2 or 3 different functions, the efficiency of the cell falls down, it drops down. Now we need to increase the efficiency, we need to maintain the efficiency of these meristematic tissues. Because of that, we have given only one function for them, just to carry out cell division, to increase the number of cells, which will be the ultimate result to growth as the growth of the plant, right? So no chloroplast, that means no chlorophyll, no photosynthesis take place. So then here you can write the sole function, right? The priority function, sole function of meristematic cell, sole function is to carry out cell division. So the main function of the meristematic tissue cells in meristematic tissue is to carry out cell division. Now, any other plant cell would have a chloroplast also to carry out photosynthesis, no? But these cells are not like that. These cells have only one function. The main priority function is to carry out the cell division that is responsible for the growth of the plant. These cells are even released from carrying out the main biological process of the plant, which is called the photosynthesis. Are you guys clear with that? Guys, are we clear with that?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
Right. Okay. So then, can you remember that I told you that these cells need energy to carry out photosynthesis? Sorry, carry out cell division. I told you that they have cells which can actively divide by mitosis. Then I underlined it and told you that it needs energy, right? So these cells require a large amount of energy. They require a large amount of energy. Because of that, they have large number of mitochondria. Usually the other cells have very less number of mitochondria, 1 or 2 mitochondria, but these cells have a lot of mitochondria, because the main purpose of having a lot of mitochondria is to carry out more and more cellular respiration. If you can remember, the function of the mitochondria is to do cellular respiration to produce energy for the cell. So these cells have a lot of mitochondria in them because they need a lot of energy to do cell division. Okay, that is a specific feature that you need to talk about it, right? They have a lot of mitochondria and they have no chloroplast, right? Okay. Then these apical meristematic tissues can be seen in 3 different places. Okay, then I have a question to you. All right. Now, when you talk about a plant, right? So now we know how the plants grow. That is as a result of the cells in the cell division in the cells of the meristematic tissues. So then I'm asking, when you talk about a plant, just imagine that you have a plant. Okay, you have the ground like this, and the ground like this. Okay, you have the ground, and then you have a plant. Okay, stem is here, and this is the peak end of the plant. Okay, and the roots are also there. Okay, let's say roots are also there. Okay, right, you have a root like this, right? Okay, so then this is the apex, of the plant, apex Okay, I would name it as I would name it as A, right? Then I would name here as B, and then I would name here as C. Now tell me from which part A, O, B, O, C the plant increases its height, or else growing. Let's say, tell me, all of you should give me a response as a result of increasing the length of which part the plant grows. Plant grows. What do you think, Shanuki?
So the top part, right?
Apex.
The A
Okay.
part.
Okay. Okay. Apex. Okay. What about Upeka's idea?
Sir, you're asking where to start to grow
Or
from.
B, right?
No, 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 not that. No, not that it starts to grow. I'm asking where would it result the growth of the plant? Simply.
Sir, C.
See. Okay. Perfect. Right. Then Elisha,
Yeah.
just drop me a text very quickly. Okay, right. Elisha and Upeka. Okay. Now see, if the plant is now, you are telling if you increase the length of the plant per part in the C, that means if now cell number should be increased at C, then only this whole thing moves up. The cell growth has that means the cell number should increase at point C. So then the whole thing like moves up like this. Okay, hold on, not from there. Okay, if the cell growth increases at point C, the whole thing would be moving up like this. Okay, I don't think that it would work. Okay, the whole thing would be moving up like this. Whole thing would be moving like from here, the whole thing would be moving up like this. It's what I'm telling, right? So then imagine Upeka and
So,
Elisha.
sir,
Yeah. Yeah, am I?
so you're talking like, so the A part like go up or like increases when
Yeah.
the C part grows, right? So
Yeah, no,
that's the
I'm
answer,
not,
right?
no, I'm not telling like that. I'm just explaining it.
Oh,
Yeah. I just mentioned this is the A part, and this is the part B, and then this is the part C. Now, Elisha and Upeka said that if there's a growth reported from part C, that would result as the growth of the overall plant. Now, if you can remember, if what is the growth of this multicellular plant? Increasing the number of cells. Increasing the number of cells. What cells in the plant could be increased? Is it permanent tissues or meristematic tissues? Meristematic tissues would increase the number of cells. So that means for this plant to grow, cells in this region now, according to your life, we are just understanding this fact. Okay, that's better that you came up with this answer. So then I have a chance to explain that. So that we are like thinking. We are thinking if the if the plant grows as a result of growing or increasing increasing the size of the parts at point C. That means uh, cell number at the place of C should increase. The number of cells in the part of the plant at point C should increase, right? That means what sort of tissues should it have? Meristematic or permanent? I told you permanent tissues are not dividing. Cells in permanent tissues are not divided. They have lost the ability of dividing, right? So then what should obviously you should have here? Meristematic tissues. Cells in meristematic tissue should be present here. So they would be doing their duty of cell division to increase the number of cells at point C. As a result of that, the height of the overall plant and the broadness of the overall plant would be increased. Now just tell me, these tiny cells called meristematic cells, which are like responsible for cell division. I told you that they are not permanent cells. Now, when you talk about these two cells, permanent cells and meristematic cells, tell me what cells what tissues do you think that do you think strong? Meristematic tissues or permanent tissues should be strong? What do you think should be the strong? Meristematic or permanent? With the word, just come up with an answer. Meristematic tissue, the permanent tissues are
Permanent.
strong. Permanent, right? Permanent tissue should be stronger, right? They are strong. They're very strong, right? So then meristematic tissue should be very weak, very soft, right? So then if you had, okay, just now you got to tell me the answer, right? If you got meristematic tissue, now if you are saying that the growth of the plant will be resulted from point C, that means you should have meristematic tissues here. We simply call them as meristems, right? We should have meristematic tissues here. That means they contain cells which have the capability of doing the cell division. Okay, and this is supposed to be very soft tissues, not so strong tissues. So then now tell me, what if a wind comes? What would happen to the plant when it starts to shake? If you have meristematic tissues in this area,
Sir, it will break.
exactly, it will break. So then in this area, in part C, what sort of cells you should have?
Permanent.
Yeah, permanent. Can you understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what about Upeksha? Oh, Upeksha was talking. What about Shanuki?
Understand, sir.
Right. So then it's obvious meristematic tissues should not be here. And then I'm talking to you about this root. In this root, let's talk about this place and let's talk about this place. I would mark it as X and Y. Tell me which place should not have meristematic tissues. Which place should not have meristematic tissues? X or Y? Come on, hurry up. Somebody say the answer.
Sir,
This is a,
why?
no, I'm asking, this is a root, huh? Root. Why do you say why?
Because X is near the C
X is,
and it needs to hold it.
yeah. I'm asking where should not it have the meristematic tissues? I'm asking where shouldn't it have the meristematic tissues? X or
Where
Y?
is the X?
X, no, right? Because this is the place where the plant root is connected to the stem. Root actually fix the plant to the soil. If you had meristematic tissues in this place called X, what if somebody comes and shakes the plant? The plant would get easily detached from the root and the plant falls down. Can you understand? So this place should also have what tissues? Permanent tissues. Then obviously we will come up with the answer at the apexes, right? The apexes should contain what tissues? Meristematic tissues that are capable of cell division. Then from which part of the plant the size of the plant is getting increased? The height or the length of the plant part is getting increased. From the tips, apex, the tip or the apex increases the height or the length of the plant part. That means the tip or the apexes contains basically the meristematic tissues. Are we clear with that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sir, clear now.
Clear, no? Right. So then we have three types of meristematic tissues basically. Okay, we have three types of meristematic tissues. Depending on the location. Apical meristems. Apical meristem is the first one, right? So apical meristems also can be found at the shoot apex, root apex, and auxiliary buds, right? Plant increases their height because of the cell division in these tissues, right? Okay, now listen. Now when you talk about this plant, let's take a plant again, right? You have the ground like this, and then you have the plant like this, and this is the apex of the plant. I'm really drawing the apex of the plant with this tab screen. Right? Okay. Right. So here at this point you have apex. This is the shoot apex. Shoot apex. You have meristematic tissues. And then when you talk about the root apex, you have to draw this diagram also. Root apex contains meristematic tissues. And what are these auxiliary buds? And then you can call them as lateral buds also. Lateral buds, the same thing. Have you seen these tiny little things which comes out of this plant and it can develop into a sometimes leaf or into a branch, right? So these are called terminal auxiliary buds, right? Auxiliary buds or lateral buds. Shoot apexes are called terminal buds. Okay, they are called terminal buds also. Shoot apexes are called terminal buds also. They're called terminal buds. Yeah, called terminal buds. And then these are auxiliary buds. Okay, auxiliary buds are these, right? These are the auxiliary buds, places where you have like tiny little things which comes out of this plant, which can eventually become a leaf or a branch. We call them as auxiliary buds, right? Or lateral buds. Now, all these three places contain meristematic tissues. That means, as a result of cell division in the shoot apex, the height of the plant would increase. As a result of the cell division in the meristematic tissues of the auxiliary bud, this can eventually become a leaf or else a branch. As a result of the cell division in the meristematic tissues in the root apex, the length of the root could increase. Are we guys clear with that?
Clear,
Are
sir.
you right? Upeksha, Elisha?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Right. So then, now can you remember, now coming to grade 10 stuff, okay, can you remember the plant reproduction in grade 10, right? We recently finished it too. So when we were talking about the dicotyledonous plants in grade 10 reproduction, plant reproduction, we actually came across that there are two different types of growth in this dicotyledonous plant. They had a primary growth and a secondary growth. What was the primary growth? We actually discussed the primary growth of a dicotyledonous plant as the increase in the height of the plant. Then ඔයාලා අඹ පැලයක්, just a small mango tree, dicotyledonous plants වලට තියෙන taproot system එකක්නේ. If you plant such a plant, what will happen? The amber plant will increase its height, but the stem wouldn't be broad, right? The පොඩි කාලේ අඹ ගහක් පොඩි කාලේ what happens? It just increases its height. ඒක මහක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ නේ, stem එක broad වෙන්නේ නැහැ නේ. stem එක broad වෙන්න නම් අඹ ගහ ගොඩාක් ලොකු වෙන්න, right? So then when the when the height, just hold on, give me a minute. Right, okay, right. So then right, so then when you talk about this primary growth of a dicotyledonous plant is the increase of the height of the plant. හරිද? එතකොට අඹ ගහ ටිකක් උස ගිහිල්ලානේ කාලයත් එක්ක stem එක broad වෙන්නේ. So that is broadening of the stem is the secondary growth of the අඹ ගහ, right? Dicotyledonous plant. And when you talk about this monocotyledonous plant, දැන් හිතන්නකෝ coconut plant එකක් වගේ plant කරපුවම හීනි coconut ගහක් උස ගිහිල්ලා පස්සේ stem එක broad වෙනවා. There's no such thing happening in the monocotyledonous plant. ඒගොල්ලෝගේ height එක increase වෙන එකයි stem එක broad වෙන එකයි uniformly වෙනවා at the same time. ඒක ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ primary growth secondary growth කියලා stages දෙකක් නැහැ. Monocotyledonous plants. When you come to talk about dicotyledonous plant, they obviously have this primary growth of increase the height of the stem, and then the secondary growth is the broadening of the stem. Are we clear with that part that we have studied in plant reproduction in grade 10? ඒක මතකද? I hope පොඩ්ඩක් හරි මතක ඇති කියලා. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So then so the height thing, increase in the height of the cell increase in the height of this dicotyledonous plant is the result of the division of cells in the apical meristems. දැන් මේ shoot apex එකේ cells divide වෙලා meristematic tissues වල තියෙන cells divide වෙන හින්දානේ මේ height එක උස යන්නේ ගහක්. So height, increase in the height of the dicotyledonous plant is the result of the cell division in the apical meristems. Okay, right. Then you have something again, something called intercalary meristems, right? Intercalary meristems are found only in certain plants like grass, right? So when you talk about this grass, in grass, like you have things like this. Grass එකක් ගත්තාම මෙන්න මෙහෙම තියෙන දැන් ඔය සමහර grass තියෙන මෙහෙම තියෙනවා. මෙහෙම ගිහලා තියෙනවා. ඒවල මෙතනින් එනවා. ආයි මෙතනින් එනවා මෙන්න මෙහෙම එකක්. right? සමහර grass වල මෙහෙම එනවා. මේවල දැකලා තියෙනවා පොඩි නිකන් node එකක් වගේ තියෙනවා. We call them as nodes, right? මේවට අපි කියන nodes. You need to copy them down, right? Node. ඒකෙන් එන internode එක තමයි මේක. ඒකෙන් එන internode එක තමයි මේවා. එතකොට intercalary meristems are found in special like in grass at the internode at the nodes where nodes වල intercalary meristematic cells වල cell division එක නිසා තමයි as a result of that only the internodes growth outward මේවා තමයි grass එකේ නිකන් leaves වගේ තියෙන්නේ, right? And when you talk about the මෙහෙම grass එකක් ගන්න ඒකෙත් එහෙම තමයි, right? මේ internodes තමයි grow වෙන්නේ, right? මෙන්න මෙහෙම internodes තමයි grow වෙන්නේ. ඔය එතන එක node එකක් එතන node එකෙන් තමයි internodes grow වෙන්නේ, right? Like this grows. Okay, simply intercalary meristems are found in plants like grass. The length of the internodes increases due to the cell division of the meristematic cells, meristematic tissues. Okay, right. Then when you come to lateral meristematic tissues, lateral meristematic tissues are found in like found laterally in the stem and the roots of plant. Found laterally in the stems and the roots of plant. You find lateral meristems in roots as well as in stem, right? These are found parallel to the longitudinal axis. They are found longitudinal axis parallel to longitudinal axis. Parallel, right? Parallel, right? The diameter of the plant increases due to the action of the cell division of these tissues. So can you remember the secondary growth of a monocotyledonous plant increases the broadness of the stem, right? Increasing the broadness of the stem. That result as the action because of the action of the cell division of the meristematic cells in lateral meristems, right? It's what dicotyledonous plants or stem make a broad vein as a result of the cell division in the meristematic tissues in lateral meristems, right? Lateral meristems. So where exactly is it? Now you have an example here, right? So they have taken a grass-like plant, not a grass-like plant. Sketch all these three types of meristematic tissues are included, right? So here, see, apical meristems are here in the shoot apex. There can be a apical meristem present in root apex as well, and then in what do you call auxiliary buds, lateral buds also, right? It was intercalary meristem. They make grass grass intercalary meristem. මේවල result එකක් විතර තමයි internode. දැන් මේක 10ක branch එකක් නෙමෙයි යා. මේක intercalary meristems ගැන කතා කරනවා නම් this cannot be a branch of a monocotyledonous dicotyledonous plant. Dicotyledonous plant එක branch එකක් නෙමෙයි මේක woody plant එක branch එකක් නෙමෙයි මේක. එහෙම ගන්න බෑ. එතකොට ඔයාලා හිතනවා මේ branch එක තමයි මේ intercalary meristems වලින් හැදෙන්නේ කියලා. No, that's not true, right? මේ grass එකක් වගේ plant එකක් ගත්තාම මේකේ තියෙනවා nodes. මෙන්න මේ වගේ nodes තියෙනවනේ මේකේ grass වගේ nodes. අන්නේ nodes develop වෙන්නේ intercalary meristems වල. Right? And then when you talk about the stem, if you want now again coming to the dicotyledonous plant එකක් ගත්තාම ඒකේ stem එකේ තියෙනවා මෙන්න මේ වගේ lateral meristems cell division එක නිසා lateral meristematic tissue එක ලොකු වෙනවා. Then stem එක broad වෙනවා. Lateral meristematic tissue එකේ තියෙන cell number එක වැඩි වෙනවානේ. Once the lateral meristematic tissue cell division කරන්න what happens, the cell number increases in the lateral meristem. So then the stem broadens, right? So then it says example where the lateral meristems are found. Then we had the example where the apical meristems are found, and we had the examples where intercalary meristems are found, especially in plants like grass. And then examples where the lateral meristems are found in cambium of dicotyledonous plants. Cambium of the dicotyledonous plant is a lateral meristematic tissue. What do you mean by cambium? If you have heard of the xylem and phloems, right? Then the tissue which is in between the xylem and phloem is called the cambium. Okay, right, like this. Now see here like this. Cambium in plant is a layer with actively dividing cells between the xylem and the phloem tissues that is responsible for the secondary growth of the stems and the root. Secondary, okay, that is the thing, right? So then when you talk about a cross section of the plant, this is a cross section of a stem. Right? Basically the cross section of the stem. So you have the xylem. Can you see that xylem? And then you have this phloem. Can you see that? Now from when you're coming from outward, right? When you're coming from outward, you first found the cork, and then you find phloem, and then you find the vascular cambium, which is a black color circle, and then you find the xylem, right? So that's how it is, right? So then the tissue layer, which contains meristematic tissues, where meristematic cells located in between the xylem and the phloem, is called lateral meristem. Okay, cambium tissue is contain a lateral meristem, right? So the tissue layer which is in between the xylem and the phloem is called the cambium. The cambium contains lateral meristem. Now, what happens when there is a cell division take place in the cambium, right? The cambium becomes broader. The cambium size increases when the number of cells in the cambium increases. So cambium becomes broader. Cambium broad, cambium broad කොට මේ phloem එක පොඩි වෙන්න බෑනේ. What happens to the phloem? Phloem moves outward. එතකොට overall මේ තියෙන stem එකේ diameter එක ලොකු වෙනවා. Right? Did you get that, guys?
Yes, sir.
Right? So then finally you should understand, when the stem is getting broader, the xylem and the phloem also gets moved away from each other. Can you understand that? Because the cambium tissue is getting broader, that is why the stem is getting broader. So as a result of that, the xylem and the phloem tissues are getting moved away from each other. Now since the cambium tissue is a very tiny layer, xylem and phloem are located near to them, right, near to each other. But if the cambium tissue do the cell division in the lateral meristematic tissues, and if it becomes much broader, what will happen? Finally, the xylem and the phloem gets moved away from each other. Are we clear with that also? Are we clear with that also? When this layer gets bigger, phloem moves away, and then the xylem phloem will have a large. Now just imagine, හිතන්නකො මෙන්න මෙහෙම phloem cambium එක මෙන්න මේ වගේ දඩ size වුණා කියලා. දැන් phloem එක මෙතන, දැන් xylem එක මෙතන, phloem එක මෙතන. ඉස්සලා කොහොමද තිබ්බේ? ඉස්සලා තිබ්බේ xylem එක මෙතන, phloem එක මෙතන. Cambium එක was very tiny. Then the xylem and the phloem was closer. Now, as a result of cell division in the lateral meristem, cambium එක මේ වගේ broad වුණා. දැන් xylem එක phloem එක has moved away from each other. Are we clear with that? Upeka, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Right. Upeka, at what time do you have the class?
Sir, around 5:30.
5:30. Right. Okay. Shall we start to talk about permanent cells also very quickly, because you have nothing much to talk about it. We have in the class we have finished the discussion from simple permanent tissues. So then we can start to talk about that also. I'll just be really quick. Okay. Quickly write the definition for permanent tissues. Now we have spoken about meristematic tissues. They have the capability of doing cell division that results in the increase of the size of the plant. Basically, the broadness of the stem increases due to the cell division in the lateral meristems. Internodes in grass increases the length as a result of the cell division in intercalary meristems, and height of the plants and the root and the branches becomes a reason of the cell division in apical meristematic tissues. Okay, so then we come across the permanent tissues. As you know, that they have no capability of doing the cell division, so they are permanent cells. They have different functions but no cell division capability. Okay, let's write quickly the definition for that. A tissue that have lost a tissue with cells that have lost their ability of cell division. A tissue with cells that have lost their ability of cell division. And specialized to perform a particular function. and specialized to perform a particular function are called are called are called meristematic tissues. Are called meristematic tissues, right? So meristematic, sorry, permanent tissues are called permanent tissues. So permanent tissues have no capability of doing cell division, right? So when it comes to permanent tissues, we have two different types of permanent tissues: simple permanent and complex permanent tissues. Now, you know, these permanent tissues have the cells which contains cells which are not capable of doing the cell division. Permanent tissues have cells which are not capable of doing cell division. And the permanent tissues also divides into two, right? Now, there is one type of a permanent tissue in that you have only the same type of cells. Cells are not capable of doing cell division. That means they are permanent cells. And this type of tissue contains the same type of cells. Cell tissue is made up of the same type of cell. The next type is tissue contains cells of different types. All of them cannot do cell division, but the tissue contains cells of different types, right? Tissue contains not the same type of cells which cannot do the cell division, different types of cells which cannot do cell division, right? So this is called simple permanent tissue, and this is called the complex permanent tissue. Are we clear with that? How they are categorized into two? Permanent tissues contain cells which are not capable of doing the cell division, and they are further categorized as simple permanent and complex permanent tissues. Simple permanent tissues contain the cells of the same type throughout the tissue. Complex permanent tissues contain cells of different types. Are we clear with that, guys? Girls, are we clear with that? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Right. You need to highlight these two. Highlight these two also. Simple permanent tissues and complex permanent tissues. None of the cells present in them cannot do cell division. Can do cell division. Are we clear, guys? So then we are moving. Right. Shanuki, I did not hear anything from you.
Understood, sir.
You got to draw these diagrams also if it is necessary when you're writing things on the tube. Right. Next, simple permanent tissues. Permanent tissues composed of single type of cells. So then now we are going to talk specifically about these two. Simple permanent tissue. Now you know that is a tissue which contain cells which cannot do cell division, and it contains only single type of cells, same type of cells. Permanent tissues composed of a single type of cell, single types of cell, are called simple permanent tissues. That has to be highlighted. That has to be highlighted. Permanent tissues composed of single cells that are called simple permanent tissues. Now we have simple permanent tissues, same type of cells, no cell division in those, right? According to the shape of the cell, very important. Now simple permanent tissues are also categorized into three types. Simple permanent tissues are also categorized into three types, right? So how the categorization take place? Depending on the shape of the cell, okay, shape of the cell, and the nature of the cell wall, depending on the shape of the cell and the nature of the cell wall, these simple permanent tissue are categorized into three types: as parenchyma, collenchyma, and sclerenchyma. Right? Simple permanent tissues are categorized further into three types by considering the shape and the structure of the cell wall present in the tissue. So we consider the shape of the cells and the structure of the cell wall present in the permanent simple permanent tissues to categorize them into three different types: as parenchyma, collenchyma, and sclerenchyma. Right? So that is how this categorization comes. Are we clear with that also, guys? Permanent tissues permanent tissue එකේ තියෙන cells වල shape එකයි ඒ cells වල තියෙන cell wall එකේ structure එකයි බලලා nature එකයි බලලා අපි මේගොල්ලෝම තවත් categories තුනකට දානවා: parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma. Are we clear? But still all of these three type of cells contain cells which are not capable of doing cell division. තේරුණාද ළමයි?
Yes, sir.
Okay, right. So I'll